Hello and welcome to another episode in the SF Masterworks reading discussion group. I don't know if those words together made sense. I just said them, but we are working our way through the SF Masterworks in the order they were published as Masterworks by Golangs. We are discussing War of the Worlds today by H.G. Wells, and we read one book every month. These discussion groups are open to anybody interested. I love how coordinated that swipe across the screen was. And yeah, so what was I going to say? Yeah, the next three books I will pull up really quickly, but I'll let everyone go around doing introductions first because I didn't pull it up first like I usually do. But read one book a month. I definitely know Flowers for Algernon is next, and then Ubik is after that by Philip K. Dick. And I think there's a Thomas Sturgeon book, but
It
I'll
is a
find.
Gregory Bamford book
Oh,
called Timeskip.
Timeskip. Thank you, Chris. So that's what's coming up for September, October, and November. And if you'd like to join us for the discussions, please check out the Patreon forum. Jared, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I am Jared. I run the Fantasy Think, a YouTube channel, and I'm on Speculative Speculation podcast and the Oscar Project for Film Chewing, and I'm also on Panel Chewing with my friend Steve at pagechewing.com.
Very nice. Leila?
I'm Layla Goshi. I'm a writer, poet. Have a poetry collection coming out
Yay.
sometime
Nice.
soon. Yeah, and just I enjoy reading science fiction.
And Chris?
And me. So, my name's Chris. I'm from the Chronicle of Chris YouTube channel, and also from many of the places that Jared talked about: Speculative Speculation podcast, the Oscar Project podcast, and that kind of thing. And of course, this great reading project that is now in year 3. Whoop whoop.
Yes, we are. That is awesome.
Yeah.
It is awesome.
Yeah, we've been going for 2 years. We've made our way through 23,
5.
24.
This is the 25th book in the
Nice.
discussion rooms. Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, that is awesome. Cool. So War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. What are we all thinking? How much did we like it?
You
I
go
will
first,
go
Forrester.
last.
Come on.
Yeah, you go first, man.
Come on.
Oh, great. Start with the negative Nancy. Okay. So this book I did not enjoy very much. There were SF Masterworks books that we've read in the last 2 years that I found somewhat boring, but I was able to plow through the boring parts to get to the good stuff, and that was fine. And ultimately the good stuff made the book for me. Usually, like, I think the closest comparison I make is Olaf Stapledon, which his books were a little difficult to read, and in the sense of it was a single person narrator who's just sort of like stating what could be facts in an alternative world, right? And it didn't too much read like a story. This one, I think, is and maybe I Am Legend, but both of those, they had enough other things that I still stayed interested and enjoyed the book at the end of it all. This one, short as it was, I did not enjoy it, and I think all of it is down to my personal preferences. I do not enjoy zombie apocalypse movies or like post-apocalyptic movies where like things just go into chaos, and this was that in book form. And then the other thing that I have recently learned I don't enjoy very much is when there's just one person telling us everything and there are no exchanges with other characters or no other characters to latch on to, and it's just one person making their way through the world. I find that incredibly boring. So yeah, it just had too many things that, and I happened to learn that from reading Olaf Stapleton again and the time machine. So, um, so this just seems to be the author's style, at least so far. So
Mhm.
that's that. But what I will say is what it what it did feel like, and I think he touched upon a lot of the same themes as he did in that short story we read at the beginning of the big book of science fiction about the meteor. I think it was called The Star.
Star, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it was a meteor striking the planet, and the main thing he seemed to focus on in that short story was how everybody sort of just getting on with their lives, even though they knew that this big disaster was headed their way, and living their daily mundane lives. And this seems to be a little bit of an extended critique of a similar sort.
Mm.
At least the few things that sort of stood out to me did that plus I suppose like a bit of an indictment on like the hubris of like you think you're all that, hey, there could be a species that just thinks you're ants and will crush you like you are. So yeah, that's it. Like
Mm.
there were a few good and interesting ideas there. I just unfortunately couldn't uh what's the word, chew on them too much because I did not. I was just waiting for the book to be over for a long time. Yeah, that's that.
Mm.
All right.
Yeah.
What else? Who liked the book? Let's hear some of those
Oh,
thoughts.
okay. I'll go next, I guess. I I like the book. I I I just I don't know. There's something about this late 19th century style that just grabs onto me for some reason, and I really enjoy that type of storytelling. For some and the funny thing about this book is this is a book that you go into, and unless you've been living under a rock, you already know what the story is. You know what the story is. You know how it ends, and you know the basic premise because every single alien invasion movie that's ever come out is basically War of the Worlds redefined in some manner or
Yep.
another, and the and so it was strange going into this and having it was strange having actually never read the actual book before, um, and going into it and already knowing basically the whole story, what's going to happen throughout it, other than the little quirks that a late 19th century viewpoint brings to brings to the story. And so I kind of enjoyed seeing how geared it was towards the British countryside,
Mhm.
um, specifically because it was told. It was Wells telling the story to his countrymen, and it was that kind of a beware type story. This is what can happen to us if we are invaded. This is what we're going to do. We're going to set up a picnic on the countryside and watch what's happening below, which I found hilarious.
Mm.
Only in England, right? But the but he the ideas that he brought forth with this book have stuck with us for a very long time, and they reflected the fears of the populace of the time that he was writing. People were worried about war. They were worried about a big war, and because there was a lot of power being generated, a lot of new mechanisms being coming out, and a lot of new inventions and machinery, and a lot of new ways to kill people were being invented, and that was reflected in this book. That this the Martians were just a stand-in for whoever was going to build that next big killing machine weapon, and that's what they were. And it was especially poignant in one section where the Martians they put out the black gas
Mhm.
there, and it's like that almost foretold the trench gas warfare, World War I, right then and there. And that was actually kind of haunting. those sections and those paragraphs where he was describing that the shrieking and the falling and the shouts of dismay about that gas that was overcoming people, and so he was reflecting the fears of society. He was a little prescient about where war was going, and so I really dug into that and I liked it. I was a little bored about some of the town descriptions from one town to the next, but I was just like, okay, that's that's where he is, so that's what he's doing. But I mean, overall, it really is a classic for a reason, and it's should be held up as such. It's just a wonderful little piece of work.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm I'm a little bit of both. First I'm glad I had watched the original film, although it's been years, and then the remake. So I kind of had a sense of, the story, although the remake doesn't really seem to be that close to the story.
Yeah, I would agree with
Um, yeah, but like Jared, I noticed there are still things with us today, such as the giant silent city where everyone is gone. London is evacuated, and the octopus. Now we see, the alien looks like an octopus, and now even today we're like, oh, aliens could be, octopi could be aliens, and so yeah, just these ideas that have kind of stuck with us, which I can imagine at the time this was written, people were like, wow, you
yeah.
know, and so that's kind of how I appreciated it. But I did have, I think it was the early, not late 19th, early 20th century sensibility of, he leaves his family, he leaves his wife, you know, but he leaves his family because he wants to go see some action. He wants to go see some killing, which is kind of like a war thing too. Come to think of it,
Yeah.
Um, but instead, he ends up getting stuck in this house for like 2 weeks, and meanwhile, his brother's out saving people, and his wife and cousin have some kind of adventure. So I was kind of looking at it in a wry kind of, I found that kind of humorous that he was like, oh, I'm going to leave these people here, but I'm going to go out and investigate and see what's going on. And it seems like everybody else had their, like big experience. And he had a big experience too. I mean, being stuck under aliens for 2 weeks, yeah, is no big thing. But I just something about that I found um, funny, I guess, that he could have had just as um, a dangerous, fraught experience if he had just stayed where he was. But of course, he didn't know that. He thought he was thinking of leaving them safe. Um, and then just some other little things. I had marked some things which we can come back to, but one I'm thinking of, his brother. He's okay. The other thing is he told his brother's story instead of telling.
Mhm.
I mean, the writer's choice, instead of just having a section where the brother tells the story. And yeah. Um, so, and maybe that was because of, it was a magazine serial, right? It was like, yeah,
It almost certainly was if it was published back in those days. It almost
yeah,
certainly wasn't published as a novel.
it probably was. But just what that one more point, I just also found it kind of funny that he said he knew his brother wouldn't worry about him because his brother would have known that the one of the alien pods had landed 2 miles away, and so it's too far away. I'm like, no, I think an alien pod 2 miles away is pretty darn close. But again, I think that just shows back in that day, it took longer to travel 2 miles than it does now. So,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I got out of it. I thought it was kind of fun to kind of think about that. But yeah, some of the things seemed illogical to me too. But in terms of ideas, it didn't overshadow the whole story. I can see why it's um, something where those concepts have, you know, stayed with us. So
Mm. Interesting thoughts, everybody. And sort of, I'm as we go round here, it's like I sort of have a bit of. I think we're all sort of in broad agreement whether we liked the book or didn't like the book. We're sort of in the same place. I sort of come down to the idea that if this had been like the third or fourth book that we'd read in this series of books, yes, at Masterworks, I think this would have been a lot more warmly received by all of us. I believe. You know, I think our as we pick up each one of these books, you're sort of hoping at this stage, 25 books in it or otherwise, for like a new idea, something to gravitate to, and like a thought experiment around that. Whereas this is, as Jared quite rightly said, it's probably the most influential sci-fi story that's ever been written. And even if you didn't see any of the adaptations of this, of which there have been many, you've seen the ideas in this pervade right through 100 years of film, stories. The entire genre is dominated by War of the Worlds as a concept, and it sort of then messes with, oh, when you turn the page, I'm not getting the new thing that I'm seeking all the time in science fiction work, which is obviously very unfair because when this was published, the ideas would have been absolutely mind blowing. Like I kept coming back to the idea is when this was written, there were horses. There was no kind of proper steam trains, maybe, you know, the kind of boats running on thing. The 2 miles, if you didn't have a horse, you were walking it, and 2 miles walk is a fair jaunt. And yet we had this repeating image of these tripod machines rising up over the top of the trees, and that they were sort of like larger than anything anybody could ever imagine or could envisage, and the terror that would have caused in people because they could be seen from so far away. And even as we make our way towards the end of the book, you can't have the idea of the black smoke. You have the idea of the red plants, and all of these things that became very, very scary and almost created this kind of idea of what a dystopia should look like. You know, if I sort of even compare it to I Am Legend, you know, the idea of the overgrown city is sort of in War of the Worlds. You know, this kind of vegetative kind of state and plant life taking over in some ways, and the way that that plays out. Now, I will agree that the kind of middle part of the book, as they were just sort of traveling about from English village to English town to that kind of stuff, was not the most enthralling. I'm sure when it was in serialized form, the very point of, oh my god, aliens landed in Woking, or all of the places that I kind of talked about, must have been actually very frightening for the people reading it, because it wasn't just about attacking major cities and major centers. It was kind of happening on everybody's front door. And that made it the very idyllic English countryside in some cases was being attacked, and therefore you really weren't safe anywhere. But by the time we came around, I think about the last 40 or 50 pages when I read together, I started to glean some sort of thematic kind of ideas that he's playing with. I actually think the turning point is when Wales really leans into his biology degree, when he really starts to go into the breakdown of how the species kind of put together, kind of the idea that we're eating humans, creating that bit more terror, that kind of stuff. Once he got to that point and he started then the run towards the end of the book, I think he kind of started to bring forward more kind of thematic ideas about the idea of war and these kind of all-powerful juggernaut kind of machines that were coming and people that if they arrived, you were hopeless to it. And the idea that actually the outcome was determined by the divine in some way. That God was going to save them from themselves, even though he kind of not religion. He sort of is very critical of religion's part, organized religion, in terms of how people would lean on it in times of trouble. But actually, that in the big scheme of things, it was God that saved them from the Martians, because it wasn't the bigger bomb, it wasn't the bigger machine, it was the smallest bacteria and the smallest kind of molecules in society that really save them at the end of the day, which I think's it's a neat idea, and every version of War of the Worlds that I've seen sort of messes the end of that up a little bit, because it's like all of them kind of have this bit where it's all very exciting, everybody's in great threat, and then it's almost like a voiceover narrative and going, but in the end, the bacteria got them, the germs got them, and the world was okay. It never really, and does kind of similar thing in here, except it does the lead up with the plant stand out kind of a couple of chapters before the Martians, and sort of does some foreshadowing in that way that actually not all was well in it. But yeah, an interesting book. Definitely not one of my favorites for sure, but definitely glad to have read it and can kind of put some more meat on the story, so to speak, because it does have a bit more than has been in the adaptations. Not a great deal, but a bit. And you can also see why a lot of the adaptations kind of veered very strongly away from the source material and sort of inspired by, rather than telling it faithfully.
Yeah, I kind of looked at. You mentioned like of course we were saved by other worldly intervention, some of some sort, but actually it was our own planet that saved us.
Yeah,
and I kind of looked at it as that compared to the Martians, we are so filthy that we ended up killing them by our very presence. And because he was commentating on a lot of our foibles in the book, especially our penchant for wiping each other out sometimes with war, and he does bring up some of the not so glamorous sides of our human nature during the story, and it's that very thing that ended up the Martians ended up being undone.
Yeah, there was one section or just one comment where one of the passerby he was talking to, or maybe his brother was talking to, said, "Oh, something like, I'll be back once we wipe them out," or something, just a very overconfident statement. And there were a couple of sections like that, and I found that I like those details. I do feel like he did try to represent sort of how humans might react to both an alien invasion, but other situations as well. Oh, our nation will wipe them out. We will take care of it. And it was like, well, not so fast. That's not how it worked out. And I think the ending now has become kind of a trope, because I remember like Signs. Remember that? Has anyone watched Signs? I'm sure you have. Yeah. And at the end, that the aliens can't take water, or they can't stand water. If they were aliens, that's one interpretation of what they were. But yeah, so again, just kind of a sign that just a great idea that keeps on giving, that people revisit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could make a case. This story is revisited like every year by somebody somewhere, like all the time.
Well, I wanted to catch up real quick. The red plants, I had even gone back to bookmark that, but what was there a significance to the red plants? He mentioned them a few times. Was it?
There were plants from, or vegetation from Mars itself,
From
so
Mars,
they breaking over, and they initially seemed to take to Earth's atmosphere
Okay, that's
very
okay.
positively. So it grew and took over all vegetation in our world very, very quickly. And much like the Martians were doing, it was kind of overtaking all of existing vegetation that we had. So to me, it was this foreshadowing kind of technique. Plus the fact that our world is very green, Mars is red, and therefore the red color was taking over the earthiness, if you know what I mean, of our landscape, especially I would say kind of uh, rural England, which is notoriously green and trees and leafy and all of that kind of stuff, and this kind of idea of red kind of looking like death.
Okay, that's helpful because I flashed through it, thought about it, and didn't get a chance to go back and really think about that. Yeah, I like that. Interesting. Yeah.
I like how he started the book with the planet is right there. There could be other people on it, and yet we have so much pride or whatever that that no author until today has written about about the possibility of life on Mars. So he's like, I'm going to remedy that, which felt like a nice little meta statement about that too. So like, I had this idea, I'm going to write about it, but now that I've had it, it's kind of strange that nobody else did.
Hmm. I did enjoy the start of the book where it's almost the start of the book's almost hopeful. This kind of first contact story of this meteor landing on Earth, people going, as Jared said, going get their picnic and watch what's happening here. You know, this will be very exciting. People going up and checking it out, and this idea that if anybody was advanced enough that they could travel through space like that, they must be advanced enough not to be benevolent or sorry, not benevolent, malevolent. Well, they did bring rare plants, I suppose. So they brought things with them. They brought spare pods and things for them to build themselves. But that idea, and it's only when the death ray or the sun ray kind of comes out and seeing the power of the devastation, which the Martians can dish out, that the whole thing flips from this almost idyllic kind of English countryside excitement of the meteor landing, and everybody kind of gathers to see the excitement, to everybody running away fast. They can't run away fast enough, and then counterpoint that with the idea that actually, I think in a world where we had destroyed Earth of its natural resources, we would go to another planet and try and destroy it in much the same way. So this idea that you're advanced enough for
Right.
that idea, I think, was used as a mirror to reflect back in humanity and Earth itself, because to basically say, like, do it for survival. And there's plenty of evidence that Earth would do it itself, and that sort of played out through the turn of the 19th into the 20th century as it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because there were moments where it went from, like you said, very idyllic, very, very. Oh, let's see what's happening. Check this out. Something new. It's really exciting, and it went from that and to he further delved later on into some real true moments of horror, like
Yeah.
some of the descriptions of the dead people and stuff, and what was remains of them, and how some people were burnt up, and like even like the 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 priest he was with for a while,
Yeah, to cure it.
who
Yeah.
was kind of going insane, and you mentioned um you mentioned like Wells definitely had a thing for organized religion, and he had the priest saying, what sins have we done? How is this? How why is this permitted? And he's railing against the injustice of you know God fearing people being wiped out like this, and that eventually you see the horror of that priest being killed, and our main character having that the hide the way he did was some pretty really frightening stuff,
Yeah.
which of course has also been reflected a lot in stories and movies over the years as well, that sense of you have to hide in order to stay out of the sight of the alien or the creature that's hunting for you. And so there was some pretty tense moments in that regard, as far as turning it from this neat little exploration of an exciting new thing happening into a horror show that, similar to how when you first go off to war, everybody's cheering and waving the banners, and there's a parades going by, and then when the war is actually happening and the devastation of what comes back, it turns into horror, and it's very, very much similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I think toward the end, another section I'd highlighted was where he's come back to his house, and he sees an unfinished draft that he had been writing, and he said that morning he had been thinking about the moral, what is it, the moral evolution? Is that the word he used? Moral ideas with the development of the civilizing process. And then the last sentence was the opening of a prophecy. In about 200 years, I had written, we may expect, and then the sentence ended abruptly. So it's like he was asking his readers, where are we going to be in 200 years? Or just even introducing that idea of thinking about the future. I thought that was good, and
yeah, I underlined that line as well. Yeah.
yeah. He was doing something, at least, even if others had done something similar, I think it was still new to the population to think that way, because, sometimes in organized religions, it's like the future is set, if you do this, here's what will happen, here's the reward you will get if you do this. And it's like he was saying, no, we need to think more broadly. What in 200 years, where will our moral development be?
Yeah, something he explored in the Time Machine as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he obviously had a lot of ideas that he wanted to communicate through his writing. I mean, there's also I would say a strong anti-nationalist message throughout this as well. I mean, the joke that actually was in the middle third of the book about the people didn't see any really difference between the aliens and the French. It did make me chuckle, but I think there's some truth in that, in the fact that it sort of doesn't matter who it is that's coming in and invading you and killing you. People just see them as aliens because they're not part of your people. So I think there was an anti-nationalist message, and there was also that exploration when he met up with the soldier again. And when the soldier starts speaking, he's sort of wowed by his resolve and his idea to plan and all of that kind of stuff. And then that devolves when he asks him, well, what kind of steps are you going to take? And he realizes that it is just bluster, and that it is just kind of this idea that we will be, fight for our country, and we'll hide and we'll take over the machines and use them against them. Well, this is fantastic. So what are you going to do in the meantime? Well, I don't know. We'll sort of figure it out,
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah. Well, first we gotta eat, so let's just eat.
Exactly. And as soon as he asks him for some detail in it, everything falls apart, and the sort of mist falls from his eyes, and kind of going, "Oh, right, this is nothing. This is vacuous in a lot of ways. This kind of idea and this bravado that's coming in and he sort of relates it then to the message of the church and the message of these ideas of hope and what you should be doing, because they're not really useful to people in kind of war times or in times where they're running for their lives and sprinting to get away.
It's interesting in terms of well, there's that, but also in terms of like when you mentioned France, and mentioned that, the aliens are only landing in England, right? I mean, I found that very interesting from a worldview perspective. Of I don't know about him. I really don't know if that was a conscious choice, but for the reader who might not be ready to think, oh, one landed in Australia and one landed in India and one landed wherever else, um, that was too that would be too broad to try to figure out how to manage all of that. So they were gonna like cross the English Channel or something. I mean, it's really those are the things that kind of made me laugh. But I know at the time it made sense, for the audience and the author. But now it's fun, fun to think about. Yeah,
Britain was also the major colonial power in the world at that time. So again, this idea, I mean, if it was written today, it would have landed in America, it would have landed in New York or somewhere just outside New York, or in much the same way as like Arrival. Did that kind of thing where it split the six pods or whatever over the face of the earth, and sort of everybody had to work together, But I think in this case, because it was sort of serialized, almost certainly in a magazine, and your readership was probably English people, British people, at least initially, then you're
yeah,
writing for that audience, I think, more so than anything else, to
Right.
try and scare them.
Yeah.
that's kind of
Factor into that planes aren't even going yet.
Yeah.
yeah,
So the idea of this long distance travel is very foreign,
But
other than really long trips.
they even talk about that when they basically say that the cylinders or discs can kind of they become airborne, and they're like, oh dear, this
Yeah,
is
that's like,
the end.
whoa.
It's the end of the world. That's it. We don't have a sea to protect us anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
yeah. That reminded me of something now. It's totally gone out of my head. Just I was going to say that today's equivalent, I think, in America is, the aliens will land on the White House lawn.
Oh yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Independence Day. Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Not really think about the rest of the world that they might decide to land in the Kremlin or something.
Yeah. But
Maybe
yeah,
in Russia they think that way. I don't know.
yeah. The idea is still the same though. That you think that you go to the major seat of power anywhere, and if it can be taken over quite quickly. I mean, there's many a film, etc., that basically shows how easy, like the president, can be gotten to and killed.
Yeah,
And then that is sort of like a metaphor for how easy a country will fall apart, and even the modern films like Warfare and Civil War deal with that. The Garland movies talk about how easy it is to get to the seat of power and kind of institute change, um, as a sort of idea about how fragile society is, I think, at the moment in
yeah.
some ways. So, like we're saying, these kind of ideas and the ideas that are more the world's are just they ain't ever going to go away. Like it's pretty much the
Yeah.
staple.
Yeah. To pivot a little bit, I was curious. Why do you think he didn't name anybody, even the brother, for as many times as he mentioned him? It was always my brother. He didn't give him a name and use the name going forward. It was my brother every single time. So I was curious about that choice, and I think Stapleton did that to trying to understand what effect he's achieving with that.
Yeah.
I,
I've
oh,
seen that style in other 19th century writing as well, where they'll say Mister and they'll just put a line and not actually have a name there for
Hmm.
when they're talking about a character or something like that. Even places they'll do that. I think Jane Eyre did that actually
Mm-hmm.
with some
Mm,
places, and I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind that, other than to reinforce that it's fiction
Hmm.
rather than nonfiction, um, because I think in some cases there was, you know, a fine line between what people would believe to be real and what was actually real on the page. And so that practice probably indicated that there's no real name for this. It's just a fictional story.
Hmm.
But yeah, and that's the only thing I can recall from 19th century writing that that eventually people grew out of that and but other than that, I'm not sure why the caution as far as naming things was
Hmm.
that convention was put in place.
I had layers of reaction to that actually, and that's what I put on the spreadsheet because my you know, because I did feel like there's a um, kind of a self-absorbed tone to it all the way through. But but I did catch myself just I'm reading it through today's lens and not
Do we lose her?
kind of like how we all go through life, like, oh, this was happening out here somewhere, but here's what's happening to me right now. I'm the main character, um, so, in today's lingo, we might say he has main character syndrome, even when other people are actually doing that. So that was kind of my balance in it. But then again, I do think that was the time.
Yeah.
And it did, he was the one telling the story. And I think it came across better that way for the reader to like personal him and his responses. But yeah, it caught me.
Uh, yeah, I sort of had it as the classic video game trope as being me, my brother, as being given the reader the agency to put themselves into the nameless avatar on the page. So that it was you. That's a very classic video game idea is that you never have, and also kind of carried forward. Even in films like The Matrix, instead of giving them nameless, give them a generic title like Neo, or this kind of this almost like godly or deity character. Uh, through that kind of thing, so that the user can kind of either think, God, it could be me as the chosen one, or me as having all these powers and that kind of stuff, which obviously creates a better connection. Now, whether that's successful in this book or not, I would debate, because I think that's one of its great feelings is the fact that you don't really feel much connection with the main character, especially in terms of his
Yeah.
actions, but also the actions of somebody from the late 19th century. So I think it would actually be quite odd if I could totally identify with that person as well, and in terms of what they're doing. But I don't think he pulled that part off particularly well.
Well, discuss.
We lost Leila, right? Is that
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought everybody else could hear you. Leila, you're breaking up a little bit. If you can hear us,
Okay.
okay.
Can you hear me now? Because actually, Chris is frozen on the screen too,
Um.
and so
No,
is
Am I?
Varsha.
we got Krista.
Oh, yeah.
I can start
No,
dancing again.
no, I was just saying my first rating was an
Mm,
because I did have trouble with the narrator, but
Hmm.
having discussed it, I've gone back to change it to very good.
hmm.
Ah.
Because
Okay,
now,
nice.
now I get a sense. Now I even more understand. I think what he was trying to accomplish with the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Vasha, you must have loved this when he says the ordinary sapper is a great deal better educated
Yes,
than the common soldier.
yes. I did. I was still paying attention to the book when we got to that part. I was amused because
Yeah.
Erickson kind of takes that kind of thing and runs with it. So
Yeah. I was like, ooh, sappers. I underlined it.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me that, in the Malazan
Mhm.
Book of the Fallen, which is what which is, I guess, that was my first encounter with the word sapper. He they talk a lot about how much sappers enjoy what they do. They are like full of glee when they are thinking about blowing something up, and that kind of was the same tone or idea with which Wells wrote about them too.
Yeah, they would.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
it was funny
now I
because they
have
were
to
like,
wonder.
"Yeah, we can just get
Yeah,
underneath and get inside and blow it
yeah.
up this way." And that's what
Now
it
I'm
is.
wondering if it's an English army thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
So that was fun. Yes, thank you for
mm,
reminding me of that.
yeah. I did
Uh,
just want to touch back on the horror aspect. I know Jared's brought it up, but like for all of the kind of very predictable stuff, it gets really tense and dark in a
Yeah.
couple of
It
places. Like
does.
the scene where the curate dies and is taken away, because obviously our protagonist inadvertently kills him by knocking him unconscious and then making him kind of patsy. Although I suppose it could be argued that in its own right saved himself. But that scene where the machine is going and searching through was adapted in the Spielberg remake with the kids in it,
Yes, it was.
and used very effectively in that place. So he did a proxy for it. And then the other scene that kind of sticks out in my head that was again very frightening was this idea that they could self-replicate. So when they were kind of building new machines or new tripod machines, that there wasn't an actual Martian involved, and this idea of AI kind of or computers or whatever way in a stage before that was even a thought, these things were building themselves or replacing themselves as being a sort of very scary dark thought. And you think about how much people worry about AI and computers and all that kind of stuff now. Take it back to 1890 whatever, that would have been terrifying. Absolutely
Oh yeah,
terrifying that would have that sort of effect.
yeah. And there were people in here screaming their heads off,
Mm.
saying it's the end of the world. We're done. The
Yeah.
human race is over. And if it wasn't for a few nifty bugs, that would be true.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nifty
Even
bugs.
that, I think it's kind of interesting, just just for that level of thought that um, organisms that uh, emerge on one planet may not be able to comfortably live on another planet. That there's a lot of
Mm.
surprises. Like now we're sitting here talking about colonizing Mars. I mean, these days, but there's probably a lot of surprises that um, we have yet to encounter in actually trying to do that.
Mm.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about because how many science fiction stories have you read where we go down to a planet and
That's right.
we get involved with the flora and the fauna in that planet, and it ends up being completely incompatible with humans. Um, I mean, he basically thought of that first in reverse, and
Yeah,
it's just it's amazing how many stories that we've read like that.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And there's probably some truth to it. You know, a lot of truth to it.
Yeah. Well, someday we might find out. Who knows?
Yeah.
who knows? Yeah. Um. Yeah. Any other topics for this book before we wrap up?
Mm, no, I
No.
don't think.
A classic in the true sense. That's all you can say.
Nice. Good book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. My reaction to the time machine was a big wow reaction.
Mm.
So I don't know if I was just I don't know too familiar with him at this point or what, but yeah, this is a wow too.
I think the setting plays an awful lot into that, Leila, insofar as the time machine starts in our world, but actually jumps kind of to a very new, different place. So we're not familiar with it. Whereas,
Yeah,
even though we're not living in the 1890s, there is a familiarity with the fact that it's set in Earth, in English
yeah,
countryside, etc. That you can kind of think,
yeah.
okay, we didn't step outside of our comfort zone in the same way.
I also want to say one more thing about the narrator. um, even though my first reaction was, why is he, why is he centering himself so much? There's also that sense of, yeah, in a crisis, maybe you are going to do, definitely you're going to do irrational things.
Oh yeah.
You may think you're not, but there's always something. So looking at it from that way, I can see how that was actually some of the things I thought he did that were illogical probably make a lot of sense if someone is sort of befuddled and panicked and um, yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting story to read overall, with the like knowing that this came fast, right? Like that's the problem with highly influential books. We've read so many or
Yeah.
watched so many like them that when we finally get around to reading what may have been the original, it
Yeah.
feels a little seen it before. But yeah,
Yeah.
the historical perspective is fun. Yeah, okay, then if there's not much else to add, I think we'll wrap up here. Once again, the three books coming up are Flowers for Algernon for September by Daniel Keyes, Ubik by Philip K. Dick for October, and Timescape by George Bedford. Is that the name of the author?
Benford, I think it
Benford.
Benefit.
For November. If you'd like to join us for any of these, please check out the Patreon forum. That's where we do all our planning. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.